Bergstrom, Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Economic and Community Development, one of the founders of the creative economy movement. And
so here's the proposition. Great art makes great places. Great places in turn attract great talent, and great talent create great jobs. And if we can prove that through the compelling projects that you bring to us to fund, I think we can turn around the perception of the role of the arts in Connecticut and see its funding grow over time. There is a certain amount that state government is willing to put into the arts for art's sake. Unfortunately, not that much. There's a significant increment beyond that I believe the state will put into the arts if we can convince the state that art is essential to economic development, which I strongly believe it is. I share this quote from Anne Marcuson from her piece, Creative Placemaking. She said, in creative placemaking, partners from public, private, nonprofit, and community sectors strategically shape the physical and social character of a neighborhood, town, tribe, city, or region around arts and cultural activities. Creative placemaking animates public and private spaces, rejuvenates structures and streetscapes, improves local business viability and public safety, and brings diverse people together to celebrate, inspire, and be inspired. That quote, or something like it, is on the website of the National Endowment of the Arts to help explain their Our Town project, which is their effort to put significant dollars into art as a catalyst for placemaking. It's also on the website of Art Place, Carol Coletta's multi-foundation effort to use art as an engine of economic development. The federal and national foundations have cast their die that they are going to invest in arts projects where art is an engine of economic development. So we are precisely aligned with the larger movements at the national level. In fact, Rocco Landsman and NEA said that as a result of this strategic refocusing of arts funding that we're engaged in and we're talking about today, that it has put Connecticut with Colorado at the top of the pack of states, in his opinion, that are aligned with his thinking at NEA. And I think that's the place we want to be. I hope millions of dollars of NEA funding to follow. By the way, both Carol and I believe Rocco, Carol for sure, I believe Rocco are going to be on a panel on fundraising for creative placemaking at the Envision Festival in September in Hartford. So put that on, look for that on your calendar. So this idea of art as placemaking, another way to put it is, how do we make the local live experience relevant in the digital age? The internet makes it possible for consumers and artists to find each other without the intermediary of a gallery, a theater, a public square. How do we stay relevant in that world? How do we increase the value of the live experience? How do we expand our audiences in new, innovative ways? That is exactly the same question as the question, how do we use art as an engine of creative placemaking? They're two sides of the same coin. Because one of the ways you make art relevant is by strengthening the connection between art venues and the places around them. So great art makes great places. Great places make great markets for art and artists. The two are in a symbiotic relationship. To this other role that art has in making places, particularly our cities, the kind of cool places that college-educated young innovators want to live in, and it's that talent that will create the next economy. That role for art is critical to economic development. It's not sufficient unto itself, but it's essential to our economic development. So attracting young innovators. Most of us move the most after we finish college and graduate school and before we've started to have a family, if we're going to have a family. In that decade or so between 25 and 35. We move a lot. We move multiple times. In the beginning, we move towards the large cities where most of the jobs are and the biggest pool of potential partners. And as we form into households of various kinds, some of us then downshift and move back towards the smaller cities because we think that's a place, one, where we can find a place that we can afford without a bunch of roommates we don't like, and where we can have impact. Now, as a small city, that's our sweet spot. We have small cities in Connecticut, Hartford, New Haven, Bridgeport, Stamford, Norwalk, etc., New London, Danbury, Middletown, Waterbury, New Britain, and any others that I forgot. We totally lose that advantage if we don't let young folks into our leadership circles. We don't let them help make the place better. They're not looking for a place that's done. In fact, they're looking for a place that's not done yet. It meets a certain level of safety and cleanliness and coolness, but it's not as cool as it could be. They want to help come and make it cooler. So I think it's pretty easy to argue that we have works in progress in our cities. Maybe a little bit too much works in progress, but we lose the advantage that we have if we don't let folks in. There's lots of things that have to work right in order to capture this market, and you could look at a lot of what economic development is a competition for this young mobile talent, and they're moving constantly. And in any given year, the movement in and out is a multiple of maybe 10, 15 times what the net surplus or deficit is. And it's actually so important to have this talent that it's more important to have a lot of trade and a small deficit than to have a little bit of trade and a surplus. Because this is the source of new ideas, the cross-pollinization. They're moving from institution to institution. They're connecting them to each other. They're cross-pollinating ideas. It's incredibly important. And, you know, folks say, do they want a great job? Do they want a great place? Well, they want both. And the ones who are you most want to attract have the choice of finding a great job in a great place. So if you want to succeed economically as a state, you have to have cities, because 2-to-1 they choose cities over suburbs during this 10-year period, and they're choosing the state during that period. So they don't choose to go to a suburb, they choose to go to a city and then later go to a suburb. So you either get them or not during this period, and to get them, you have to have cities that work, cities that are cool places. It's not just about art. I mean, you have to have regional and local transit that makes sense. All the fabric of walkability and bikeability at the sidewalk scale has to be seamless. You need a vibrant public realm. I think you need hip and green housing in a mix of styles. It can't just be a museum. It has to be a really interesting mix of the new and the old. And a lot of other things. So I get that. And I'm involved in a lot of those other dimensions. I'll show you a couple of examples of what I mean by art as an engine of placemaking. Some of them are from Connecticut, some of them aren't. The first one is something called Project Storefronts. It got a Art Town grant from NEA. What they do is, it's in New Haven, they get empty storefronts for free from the landlords. They put artists into them. They do very graphically compelling store window displays that draw pedestrians to the space. They see into the artists. They can go into the space, engage the artists, buy their work. It's been a phenomenal success in two ways. Every one of the spaces almost instantly turns into a private rent for the landlord. And the artists have dramatically increased their visibility and their market and have prospered from that. It's turning so fast that Project Storefronts now has to negotiate a minimum of 90 days to make it worth it to the artists, because if they didn't, the storefronts would actually turn that much faster. What they've done is they've taken the whole cycle of gentrification, where artists are pioneers and create this sort of funky vibe that then is followed by higher rents and higher money. They've taken all that 5-10 year cycle and compressed it into 90 days is one way of looking at it. Waterfire in Providence, just an amazing. I was there when Barnaby Evans started this thing, and it's a series of floating bonfires on the Providence River with music, a kind of contemplative music, Gregorian chants, that kind of thing, that are in hidden microphones, speakers, and you have thousands of onlookers of all ages. You can see them in the lower picture. All ages, races, incomes, that are engaged in this act of collective contemplation. It's an amazing thing. They're all silently watching the fire, listening to this music. It works because the artist, Barnaby Evans, was able to negotiate and maintain total artistic control of every detail and keep it for 15 years. It's an amazing project. Austin, Texas used music in a different way, making itself into, by its own proclamation, the live music capital of the world. And that made it a magnet for young talent, not just musicians, but young innovators of all stripes. And the fact that it's in Texas, which is essentially so uncool a place, just makes them feel all that more exceptional. I did some focus groups in Austin the other day. You could not dynamite somebody out of Austin. They think it's the most hip, progressive, forward-looking, coolest place that you could possibly live on the planet. So here's Infinity Hall in Norfolk, who is, in some ways, trying to bring some of that live music spirit to Connecticut. They are a small, 300-seat, about the size of this auditorium, renovated historic theater, perfect acoustics, 4-star restaurant in the bottom. The important thing is it's open 250 nights a year. 250 nights a year of live music. And they have now gone, so they're on public television initially in Connecticut, now going syndicated to 60% of the public TV stations around the country, essentially trying to do an Infinity Hall version of Austin City Limits. City Canvases is a project that was launched 2 or 3 weeks ago at the Governor's Mansion. It was inspired in part by this mural by Felice Verini in New Haven. This mural is actually on 3 different buildings. You can only see it come together if you stand in this spot. And it's a very clever way of getting folks to walk around that part of New Haven. So City Canvas put $1 million to match it with $1 million of local funding. 12 cities have indicated that they're going to do mural or illumination projects. We expect to get the proposals back at the end of this month. We're going to make decisions on funding them early next month, and we hope to have up to 12 large mural or illumination projects executed by June. So these can be whimsical. I don't know if you see the runner has gone through one building and is now at the other. Or they can be intimate, this little silhouettes on a stairway. Big, large building illuminations, or very small, tender ones. So that full range of public art and light. So here's another This is 3 ballerinas from the Stanford School for Ballet, which had been in the basement of the Rich Forum, and when the Stanford Center for the Arts ran into some financial difficulties and had to sell the Rich Forum to Jerry Springer. Frank Rich is probably turning over in his grave, actually, but anyway, they were moved to the basement and mezzanine of Old Town Hall in Stanford, which is this magnificent historic renovation. Okay, so they've been there for a while, just kind of being the pioneers now. Last week or the week before, it was announced that the Stanford Center for Innovation is going to occupy the rest of the building. So you're going to have ballerinas and technology entrepreneurs sort of mixing it up in this one incredible historic space. And it's almost as if these 3 young women anticipated this accidental convergence of art and technology. They're all now in college, majoring in science or a degree that's a mix of art and technology. It's just, so placemaking has to do with the young, has to do with education, has to do with large and small art, it has to do with performing art and visual art. It's anything you can imagine it to be. It is what you do, it is the spark you have. We want to blow on that spark and make it into a flame. So here's this one last example. There's a group in Fairfield County of PR folks and marketing types and digital media types that are commuting into the city to Madison Avenue and Chelsea and other places in Manhattan. And you know, they're tired of it. They want to be able to do what they do in Connecticut. And so they've banded together and they're going to try to create something called the Fairfield County Creative Corridor. I've suggested to them that the Creative Corridor in Connecticut actually runs through Hartford. But the point is, there's a commercial art side of this that we can exploit, that we can partner with, and that private side of the equation is organizing itself. So, to summarize, we don't plan to tell you how to use art to make great places. Today's the beginning of a conversation that will take place over the next 2 months here and in 4 other regions. A bottom-up identification of opportunities to identify how art can be an engine of economic development and placemaking. In this region, the conversation will be facilitated by the Greater Hartford Arts Council and by Tamara Dimitri of the Connecticut Office of the Arts. And from those conversations, we'll develop guidelines for our granting that will be the basis for grants that we make available in April, for response in May, and award in July. So I hope you share my excitement about the journey we're about to begin, and I look forward to working with you and seeing the ideas you come up with.